Today is day 224 of Ukrainian resistance. Ukrinform, Ukrainian Media Center. Our guest is Igar, the analyst of Ukrainian Institute for the Future, with whom we will talk about Belarus. Mr. Igar, good afternoon. Good afternoon. The first question is, Lukashenko yesterday or the day before recognized the fact that Belarus is taking part in the so-called special operation. Why did he do that? What was the reason he did it, and what's the game he's playing? Well, Lukashenko's game is not changing. It's in maneuvering, only not to take part in the military actions in Ukraine with the armed forces of Belarus. Well, he made one declaration yesterday, which was about the part of Belarus in the special operation, and the second was detailization that yes, Belarus feeds the people, provides medical services, and he didn't say Russian military, but he said the people, and also the citizens of Ukraine who currently stay within the territory of Belarus. So on one hand, it's the response to some Russian journalists or politicians about part of the Belarus, about their participation in the special operation, and on the other hand is the signal that he is still not ready for active participation or for more active actions from the military aggression vantage point. All right, then the question about the active participation you mentioned. Let's say Russia is finalizing its legal way of recognition of pseudo referendums, signing all the decrees, and it ends with the appeal to the Organization of Collateral Defense, calling Belarus for active participation. What's going to be the reaction of Belarus? Well, it's very interesting because it depends to a large extent on the recognition of the legal borders of the new territories, because from the vantage point of ODKB countries, the members said that they will not recognize the new borders. From Belarus, there was a hazard that after Lukashenko's visit, after Abkhazia, he will visit Moscow to take part in this show, the signature of the agreement. I don't know why, but Lukashenko made it back to Minsk, and he made a couple of signals meeting the ambassadors that he will withhold from such a decision, and even the information that Russia grew new territories. It was just a line in the periodic press, not the main event. So the newspapers were writing about harvest and actions of Lukashenko. So as of now, Lukashenko is going to withhold from recognition of the new borders, of so-called new borders, because it will have more political consequences, like participation of Belarus in the military actions, from which Lukashenko will evade to the most extent possible. On the other hand, the support he can count on in the world are China and Turkey. So for official Minsk, the main task is evade the military actions, at least until the 20th meeting of the Communist Party of China, which will take part in November. And Lukashenko is invited. His visit is already confirmed. It will upgrade the collateral relations of Belarus and Kitay. It will go to one step higher, maybe in level with Russia. And there will be attempt, at least now, tactically, to evade the participation. If we have questions. Do we have questions from the journalists? No questions from the journalists. All right, my next question is, to what extent Russians choose as the place of safe evasion from mobilization compared to other countries like Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, etc. Belarus is a transit zone. It was very popular as a transit zone for those traveling by car until the moment when the borders closed from Baltic countries and Poland. And the second direction is the aviation travel, because Belarus is mostly used as the transit state, but as of today, with regard to the absence of certain documents, we can say that at least 50,000 people, it coincides with the numbers mentioned by Lukashenko. At least this number, we can say, are currently located in Belarus. Since the borders will be closed with the other countries and the mobile conscription offices will be established, we may say that this situation may change because there is no physical border as such. There are a lot of forest ways, and they will keep entering Belarus through those pathways. How do you estimate how will you estimate the tune of the population? What changed starting from the beginning of the so-called mobilization and the historic attitude to Russia in view of the war? Well, the tune of the common populace, they are anti-military, and they try to manage the inner chaos in Belarus. According to certain data, about 80% of the population of Belarus are against Belarus participation in the war. Well, except obviously, even with the count of the Belarusian military, but the vector for integration with Russia is still in effect. Still, the Belarusian state propaganda, along with the Russia, and they influence some part of the Belarusian population. They are adherents of Lukashenko, and they are about 40% of the population of Belarus, and they are characterized by support of Russian Federation, and they are apolitical towards Belarus. So that the talks about common constitution, common space, if 1 year ago almost 60% were talking about the possible integration with Russia, today this number fell to 40%. And still the number which was for total integration with Russia, it grew from 6 to up 8% of the population. And the last data from analytical craft shop, they said that this team was not dominant in the society. Now it's about 33-34% of the population who are emotionally compassionate with Russia, so to say. Before, this number was around 25%. So we can say this is a compassionate. We have questions from the journalist Maria Lukashenko, Ukrinform. Within the plan of Russian mobilization, the plan was to deploy about 100 or 120,000 Russian military. We understand which hazard it poses to Ukraine, but which dangers does it pose for Belarus, like maraudery, rapery? If this may become a trigger for some protests in Belarus, how do you estimate such probabilities? Thank you. Well, let's divide. First of all, 100 or 120,000. If you follow the meeting of Lukashenko with Putin, please pay attention that every time Lukashenko visits Putin, we have about 5-6 messages coming in about some apocalyptic scenarios in Belarus. 100 or 120,000. This first pitch, implied that there will be mass shellings of Ukrainian territory to the depth of maybe 500 kilometers. The semantics of this message that this was born not in mass media of Belarus, but Belarusian mass media repeated it, but 120,000 military. There is only theoretical possibility of deployment of this number. We have about 6 platforms for unloading that we already have knowledge of. There is an information operation about movement of Russian fixed-wing aircraft to Baranachy airfield in Belarus, but part of them, like 3 to 5, were moved back to Russia. So this was only information about the reinforcement of Russian troops in Belarus, but it's mostly a mobilization of material resources, which we don't have evidence still for deployment of this number of Russian military in Belarus. On the other hand, it's possible that a number of mobilized Russians will be deployed for training in Belarusian polygons, but it's not more than 25,000, because the logic of mobilization in Russia, they want to mobilize 500,000, but at the beginning of the aggression, the Russian army totaled to 1,100,000, that they have real huge problems with even quartering and billeting of Russian military. So in that case, Lukashenko is hardly to be pushed through with this issue. There is an option of trainings near the border with joint forces of Russians and Belarusian military, with mobilization of up to 6,000 reservists. And at the same time, this training will have certain reserves of the Ukrainian armed forces to be kept near the borders. If the joint training will coincide with the arrival of the first wave of mobilization to the south of Ukraine, obviously Russia will be interested to have a part of Ukrainian armed forces reserves pulled to other parts of the front. If we talk about the inacceptance by the Belarusian of this so-called intrusion by Russians, we don't have still the information about the rapery or maraudery. If we use another component like protests, we have a very good joke in Odessa. Do you want the squares or we want a right? As of today, with a view of active political crisis, repression apparatus, the mass protests without participation of armed forces of Belarus are very improbable. However, the acts of sabotage of some surfacing conflicts, they are more or less evident, and these are just the beautiful words about the nation's mentality. So there is a different reaction by Belarusians and reaction to the sources of irritation. If Belarus enters into deeper cooperation with Russia against Ukraine, there are options of sabotage, there are options of capsizing of regime. Mr. Igar, getting back to the checkers right, the last question, can you tell us, please? Is there objective political opposition to Lukashenko in Belarus? Who can challenge the Belarus political system as of today? The sociology shows that Belarusian society is broken down into a couple of groups, one of which supports Lukashenko. It's 20 to 25%. There is a group of active adherents to the protests, it up to 25%. It includes Tikhanovska, Lagushka, and other oppositioners. Part of the society is neutral. They don't like either or. And this group is divided into a number of subgroups. For example, those who don't like Lukashenko but they like Putin, or those who don't like either. And another group is the municipal middle class. And none of the parts of this political process are currently can boast their cooperation with other groups. This adds to the weakness of Lukashenko, so he holds on just until the moment he holds on. But if you only have 20-25% of support, you cannot enter into cooperation with the other groups to change the situation. If there is anybody who can challenge the system, we rely on the fact that the opposition to Lukashenko, they don't propose any vision of Belarus of what it's supposed to look like in future. So that they don't have offers of any new laws that will work. And in this regard, they don't want to touch the system which keeps working in one way or another. So oppositioners who talk about the future of Belarus, they don't have solid offers to the society. And this is why the society is broken down in this group which resides, so to say, in their information bubble. And none of them can exceed the number of 30-35%, and no propaganda works for them. So if your propaganda doesn't work on a majority of people, your narratives are just not going to work. In Belarus, this number of population can be won by those who can explain the fundamentals of how the government machine is going to work in Belarus. And in case they reach certain number of population in their propaganda. We had Igar Tyshkevich, the analyst of Ukrainian Institute for the Future, who was talking about Belarus and talking about ours and yours liberty. Our next building is 1430. We will talk to Taras Kremen, the Commissioner for Protection of